Hi there. Welcome to my new greenhouse. And this is the best one yet. So as you might know, I use a greenhouse seasonally here. This is where I get my dahlias started and growing. This is where I put any seedlings that I need to harden off or actually even grow on for the things that like it a little cooler. Anything that happens in spring in terms of annuals or temperature sensitive plants happens through this greenhouse. And I've been using greenhouses like this for a number of years and I actually love it. It works out very, very well for me. But I don't really need a greenhouse for the rest of the year. And so I use one temporarily. And this is now the fourth greenhouse that I've used like this. But this one is quite a bit different than the other ones. And this one is miles ahead of the other ones. But that's primarily because this is actually meant to be a permanent structure. This is the HAVN greenhouse, and to my knowledge, this is a completely unique concept in terms of greenhouse construction. And HAVN arranged for me to get one of these greenhouses from Costco so that I could set it up and show you guys and share with you my honest thoughts about it. So this right here, can you hear that? That's the secret and what makes this greenhouse different from, as far as I know, everything else on the market. The structure of this is actually made of inflatable tubes. And that probably sounds a little crazy unless you are familiar with a lot of the inflatables that are now being used in the marine industry for paddle boards and kayaks and docks and furniture. There's all sorts of these products that are used with high pressure inflatable tubes, and they are sturdy as can be. And I can tell you that because I have used inflatable paddle boards before and they are just as sturdy as my fiberglass paddle board. So I'm going to walk you through the whole setup process of this, but before we get to that, I just want to walk you through some of the features of this greenhouse, because how are you supposed to know if something like this would even be right for you if you don't know the very basic information about it? So I'll start with the size. This is 10 by 10. I have had smaller greenhouses, significantly smaller greenhouses, 6 by 8s, and I've gradually added on additional greenhouses, and then I've gone up in size. Last year, the one I got, which was sort of a pop-up variety, was 12 by 8. Even though the square footage is the same on those, I like this orientation of the 10 by 10 a little bit better, and I'm going to show you why when we get inside. So this greenhouse comes as a package with the greenhouse and this fan, which is super cool because it's automated, which is like real greenhouse stuff. And that's one of the things I was missing with my other greenhouses, because I would sit there and watch my Wi-Fi thermometer from work and see the temperature in here getting up and up and up. And there was not a thing I could do until I could get home or get someone else here to open up some windows or areas or flaps to get some more airflow through. So it's really nice that I've got this fan set to kick on at a certain temperature, and that will certainly help keep the temperature in the right place in here. So whereas last year I had 4 racks running down each wall and then a center, this year I've got 3, and then I've changed the center to be 2 racks across the back, and then I've got additional racks over here. What I like about this is that there is a wide open space in the middle. Last year I was really tripping over things. What's really nice about this is that if we get a cold spell and I need to push plants, other plants in here, like say my banana or something that's super tender that I need to just put in here for a night, there's a ton of room to just throw things in here for the night and then easily take them out. So just in terms of how the space is used, greatly prefer this 10 by 10. Weird camera angle here to show you this main ridge beam up here, because this thing is actually sturdy enough that you can hang things from it, and this kit actually comes with the straps to hang hanging baskets from it. Now, I don't grow a lot of hanging baskets, but what I will say is that some of the people I know who grow plants in greenhouses actually grow some things out in hanging baskets just because it saves room on their benches. So in the future, this could be a way to really maximize that. So there are doors at both ends. However, when you install the fan, you do sort of lose usage of that door. So, I mean, you can still unzip it to get some more airflow through there, but you can't really functionally use it as a door, which turns out fine since I've got these racks at the back to maximize the space in here. So this corner shows you kind of everything you need to know about the structure of how this thing comes together. And these brackets here show how the whole structure comes together. So there's these straps, these really serious straps here, and these brackets slide into them. And then you've got just a nut and bolt, little hand screw nut and bolt that go in there. So this is how these corners connect. Additionally, there's a strap on top as well to help keep that tight. So there's a lot of redundancy in how this thing is held together. So you know that it's really, really sturdy. Here's where you inflate it. Each wall and each beam has one, or in the case of the walls, there's actually two of these. And the pump that comes with it, which is either electric or battery operated, and trust me, you're not like foot pumping these. This is an electric thing because you need a lot of pressure. Just fits right in there and fills that up. So the literature for this greenhouse says you can set it up in about 2 hours. And I will tell you, it took us almost exactly 2 hours to actually get the thing up and standing. And then there was additional time for the staking of it into the ground and putting in the fan. And I also just want to give a huge shout out to whoever it was who wrote the instructions, because the instructions were very easy to follow. The instructions also sort of suggest that you might be able to do this with one person. I would say only if you want to get very frustrated should you even think about attempting that. You need 2 people for this. That is the same as every other greenhouse I have ever set up, by the way. Greenhouses are just too big and too unwieldy to be able to set them up by yourself. So find a friend and plan on doing it with a friend. So the construction for this starts by softly inflating the end walls and the beams. And it's softly because you have to be able to get those saddles set in there, those corner pieces that I showed you. You have to be able to get those set in there properly. The pump is really nice. You can actually set the pump to a certain PSI, and throughout the book they tell you what PSI it should be at, and the pump will fill up until it hits that PSA. So you don't have to sit there and worry about overinflating or underinflating. You just plug that pump in and it turns off when it hits the right PSI. So after you get everything sort of soft inflated, then you put the pieces together using those corner pieces and those saddles, and then you inflate it the rest of the way. And then after that, you got to put the side walls on. So this whole piece right here comes as one, and this actually goes all the way over the top. So there's a zipper on each side, and you got to zip it all the way from one side down to the other. Then on the front, you've got separate pieces here and the door. So there's 3 pieces you have to attach on the front. Now these zip open on both sides, and then you can roll this up if you want. So if you need to create a little window, it rolls up like that. The other thing that I really like is that all these pieces attach to the bottom of these tubes with Velcro. So whereas with my other greenhouses, there was just big gaps where, you know, critters could come in or a lot of airflow could come in. Here, this is all secures right to the bottom. And it's strong Velcro. So these side panels are where you get your ventilation. Now, if I have 2 things that I could tweak and I wish were different, is that I wish there was some way to roll this down from the top instead of the bottom, because I don't love the whole bottom of this being open I just imagine, you know, rabbits jumping in there. I've never had that happen, but it lives in my head, right? It seems like it would make more sense to have some sort of window up here. The other issue I have is this. Granted, I am a vertically challenged person at 5'2", but I can't open up this door any farther than that. And I can open it, you can open it up from both sides. So you can create a doorway like this. And there are straps that come with it to roll this up. But in terms of walking in and out of here regularly, like just to check on stuff, before I get to the point where like the whole thing is open because it's so hot, it would be really nice if I could open this door up more than this so that when I could just make it a little easier to get in. This is a really small nit to pick, but it is one of the things that I wish were different. And then the last part of the setup here is staking. And I will tell you, they take the staking very seriously. There is like a whole page about different conditions and how you should be staking this. But I have never had a better staking kit come with a greenhouse than this one. And of course that makes sense because this is, again, meant to be a permanent structure. You can set this up and use this all year long. So we used what they consider like a level 1 staking, which is these really nice, these are, oh gosh, I don't know, 14 or 16 inch longs, really nice spikes that actually screw into the ground rather than every other greenhouse I've ever gotten just has a plain, stake that you can pull right straight out of the ground. So these twist into the ground. So even in our sandy soil, these hold really tight. And then there are these straps so you can pull really tight that actually go into this really nice D-ring, which is integral into the tube on really heavy duty webbing. This part of the strap isn't doing anything. It's just extra and we've just tied it up to here to keep it out of the way. But this strap is long enough certainly to give you many different kinds of staking options. And I will tell you, this staking works because within a day of putting this up, we had a tornado warning with a huge storm come through. And then over the course of the week, we had 3 more. 2 more tornado warnings and 1 just wallop of a storm. And the first night I actually stayed up. It didn't come through till like 2 in the morning, but I stayed up to watch the greenhouse because I just wanted to make sure we were going to be okay. And this thing was solid as a rock. The kit also comes with shade cloth that goes over the top on the outside, and that connects to these other little D-rings to keep that down. I don't need the shade cloth. I need as much sun as I can possibly get in here, so that's not something that I need. I've only had this set up for a week, so obviously there's a lot of testing that needs to happen with it. But it is by far my favorite greenhouse I've ever had so far. But it should be, because this is something different than what I've been using in the past. This is truly meant to be a permanent structure. It's constructed differently. It has different features that are much nicer, and it costs more. You can buy this at Costco for just under $2,000, which is considerably less than most greenhouse kits. And I have never set up a greenhouse kit. But I guarantee you, this is 1,000,000 times easier to set up than those. The other advantage of this is that you don't need a foundation like you do for those. So you don't have to lay a slab or have gravel or something like that. I mean, you certainly could, but you don't need those things for this greenhouse. So for me, that's another advantage. But honestly, it just comes back to the fact that the setup for this is going to be so much easier than any other kit. Now, of course, I'm not planning on using this as a permanent greenhouse, and I don't think it's really reasonable to think that you would be able to do that super successfully up north in somewhere like Wisconsin and get functional use out of it over winter, because I can only imagine the heating to heat a structure like this would be very, very challenging. But you could leave it up all year and then only use it during the parts of the year when you need it, which would be a compelling option if I had a place on my property to do that. My intention is to take this down once I'm done using it seasonally, and that will be honestly the real test of this. And then there's the question of how compact am I going to be able to pack this down into? So this comes delivered from Costco in 5 boxes, which is super nice because they are 5 boxes that you can manage each box individually reasonably. So I'm going to find out how reasonable is it to disassemble this thing and store this thing for a year and then put it back up the next year. But that's kind of off-label use for this greenhouse. This is really meant to be used for long periods of time or all year long. It did take 2 hours to set this up. However, other temporary greenhouses that I've set up have taken at least an hour and sometimes more. So an extra hour to me is completely worth it to have a greenhouse like this, because this thing feels solid. You know, with other greenhouses, like they'd be flapping around and the whole thing was kind of shaking, and I was always a little worried that the whole program was going to go tumbling through the yard. I feel very secure with this one. And I should point out that the instructions are quite clear to say that you need to keep checking the pressure of the tubes on this. This is exactly the kind of construction that goes into paddle boards and small boats. So this is super sturdy and super strong tubes. However, there will be temperature fluctuations that change the PSI in the tubes. So they do say you need to keep an eye on the tube pressure in the tubes, because proper pressure is really important, because of course the rigidity and the structure of this comes from having the right PSI in these tubes. So those are my initial thoughts on this greenhouse. I have to say, I never would have thought I would have an inflatable greenhouse. The whole idea sounds kind of crazy, but in practice, it's ingenious. So I'll continue to share my experience with this as the season goes on, particularly when it comes to taking this apart and storing this, because really that's my only caveat right now. Everything about this experience up to now is a total no-brainer for me. Would take this a million times over. I absolutely love it. But we'll see how things go when it comes time to take this apart, and particularly when it comes time to store this and how practical that really is for that use. All right, thank you for watching. You know, the best thing about making this video is that this means that it's greenhouse time and we're almost to the part where we get to do the fun gardening. All right, have a great day in your garden, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.